Hey guys, Malthor here once again, and just when you thought we were done, we still got more builds to make. Can't stop making money in this end game. Currently, there's just all kinds of crazy shit to make money off of, and yes, older voices for 3 passive voices, 300 divines. While playing this character, I just got that Forbidden Flame for 250 divines, and we've been making money. So I kind of had to keep making characters, and this one here was an attempt to spend a bit of that money. It's a Slayer with some charge stack, and the idea is basically Shield Crush while wearing the new Maven Wand Grace of the Goddess, which does a lot of extra fizz as all 3 damage types: fire, lightning, and cold. And then just do some charge stacking. Have a pretty low life pool, but be very thick behind the curtains there. So, as you know, plenty of times we've mentioned, life pool is not everything. And one cool thing that ended up happening in this build is the Merc. So this is the first time I'm using this type of Merc. He does a aspect of the spider, and then nothing else, just a few like abilities like Bladefall and some big fucking rock thing. But he's also got some kind of slow zone too. And if you'll notice throughout these clips, this Merc's actually kind of sleeper OP. With my chill that I've got, with the temp chains that he's got, with the abilities he's using, and with a buffed aspect of the spider, he is making a lot of these Uber fights kind of a joke. Like, they are animation locked into doing certain abilities for so much longer than normal that they're barely getting any abilities off. So while this is mostly a Shield Crush Slayer kind of showcase here with some charge stack and all that, I do also want to highlight just how cool this Merc is, and he can be even better because mine does not have Grace, and you can theoretically get him with Grace, so then he'd make me even more overpowered defensively, even though I'm currently very strong defensively. Once again, couldn't stop making money. Throughout my Uber escapades, did pick up a woke spell echo, and yeah, that means we're making another build as well as just gambling some money, for like crafting and stuff, because the current end game has been pretty good to me. Either way, this character is much more just about shield charge and then shield crush. Shield crush itself has some pretty decent single target, but nothing too crazy when it comes to AoE and clear. So we tried to fix that by getting a decent amount of AoE as a Slayer with some charge stack. And on top of that, using Herald of Ash, but it was also the first time I actually tried stacking cluster jewels for Devastator nodes. The Devastator nodes are the extra chance to explode mobs for fizz damage, and it's really not that good. Like, I got 4 of them in the end, I think. It was 4, so they give 15% chance each. And usually I just kind of, ignore that type of thing and just get explode somewhere else. But I wanted to try the Devastator nodes out since this seemed like a good chance to do it. I think I have 4 of them, and I don't think it's particularly noticeable. If I turn my Herald of Ash off, the explosion doesn't look very cool, doesn't look very noticeable, and doesn't feel like it's doing much compared to just what Herald of Ash, I suppose, is doing by itself. So yeah, that was kind of probably a failed venture or a bit of a waste of time. Yeah, this character overall I think is really strong, really fun, and it's a little bit expensive, but I do think a lot of the money I spent and wasted was not really necessary and can definitely be done with a much cheaper base of a character. The Grace of the Goddess wand itself is pretty damn nice, and took a bunch of divines to get it to a decent roll. So I divined it a bunch of times, I think about 40, to get one of the best rolls on the server. You can obviously do it with a lower version. You can, of course, do these types of builds with Emperor's Vigilance, but I wanted to go out of my way to avoid that this time around and actually build into real block instead of glancing with that fake kind of energy shield sort of thing. So I made a real shield that's a hybrid evasion energy shield one, and it is competitive with the Emperor's Vigilance. It is ultimately worse for damage, but it doesn't have some of that downside of the glancing stuff. And it did cost me, I don't know, maybe 20 divines to make this shield, so it wasn't the end of the world, it wasn't too bad, but it's not really a reliable outcome for the amount of crafting you might do. This here's a tier 17 that got my Merc killed almost instantly, because you rarely want to do tier 17s with the players take 6% or 5% life per hit sort of thing, because that kind of kills Mercs almost instantly. And we still managed to kill that tier 17 pretty clean, fairly deathless, without a Merc while everything's kind of buffed. So it's really kind of a testament to the strength of the setup here and the character that we can do stuff even on a back foot. I did also end up farming a lot of Simulacrum on this character. He was really good for farming Simulacrum. The previous build we just then saw was the Spark one, which is pretty damn good for farming Simulacrum, but it could still die. It was a bit more dangerous. This one's actually a bit more cruise control. It doesn't blast the entire zone quite as well as Spark, but we're still getting to 5 or 6 stacks a lot of the time, and then killing off the bosses without taking too much time. Like I said, it's not Spark where it blasts it entirely, but it was very comfortable and cozy sort of Simulacrum runs. I think in the end I did like 10 of them. Most of them were deathless. And I was just kind of chilling, zoned out while thinking of the next build, just farming a bunch of Simulacrums. So the character's defenses to like allow us to do that are 10 endurance charges. We got Fortify on the shield charge. We have a decent amount of armor, nothing huge, but a bit of armor. On top of that, a decent amount of evasion, and 68 spell and 68 attack blocks. So all of that comes together to make a pretty damn thick character, even without a large life pool. And it let me do all the Ubers in the world. Most of them were very comfortable and deathless. And I just did a bunch of endgame farm, considering that I had a lot of divines at the disposal. I had barely any fragments at that point. I was just wasting money for the sake of content. And yeah, sometimes you get lucky and sometimes you make money off those. But most of the time, if you're just going to buy Uber fragments, you're going to be losing money. This here is Uber Elder with Maven influence, and it was kind of a chaotic mess, but still got by on that one, deathless. And overall, I was pretty damn happy with how Shield Crush and this sort of Slayer setup performed. It was pretty cool, and it's also the first time I was using Omni in a while. I actually completely forgot to mention that for this entire fucking time. The Omni Amulet is what I was building around here and kind of what I wanted to do. It wasn't a huge factor in the build in the end. I think I had like 1200 Omni, which means, you know, something like 80% Elipen and a bunch of res. It was just more, I guess in the end, kind of a comfortable way of building to take care of resist, take care of Elipen, but it really wasn't anything crazy because most of this build in the end was wearing just a fuck ton of uniques and not getting that many stats. So it was somewhat of a waste, but it still worked out and made a pretty decent build, I think, but not the best example of an Omni build. That said, I think it's still a pretty decent addition to this one. Obviously, you can do, you know, crazier Merc stuff with Doriani's. Once again, I've still avoided that this entire league, and do even crazier shit just for, you know, single element scaling potentially. But overall, I was pretty happy with this attempt. So let me go ahead and show you how I built the character, and also mention what you can do kind of cheaper and not as dumbly as I did. So here's a character level 95, back to Red Globe Pain Champ. Just then had a very fat ES build and loved our blue life globe. But this time it's a red one, and I was expecting it to be kind of Pain Champ. In the end, it was actually pretty sick. Like Slayer with all the leech and damage reduction and stuff went pretty well. Hit 95 with a lot of endgame in, you know, like probably did fucking 20, 30 bosses or something with a lot of Simulacrums in 19 hours in the end, but it took me like 15 hours to hit level 95, I think. Either way, the entire character is kind of based around shield crushing and the Omni Amulet. Where's our shield crush? There. So if you get it to level 24 with the kind of way we just then did, you get a bit of a power spike, but in this case, in the end, it wasn't super worth doing. Either way, we were trying to build around Omni Amulet, so you get res and pen per 15 Omni. All of your stats just turn into Omni instead, if you're new to that sort of thing. And this is the amount of Omni I got in the end. It wasn't huge. It definitely could have been a lot better, but I tried my best to kind of make more of a balanced build in the end that had a bunch of defenses instead of just getting a lot of Omni. So this time around, that's currently what the stats kind of look like without a Merc or anything, without flasks up. Yeah, I think it can be a lot bigger with the Merc that I've got. Because the Merc currently does not give me Grace, as I mentioned. If he gave Grace as well, then I'd be damn near block capped, I think. Evasion capped, and just even thicker. But yeah, that's Omni there. We are based around Shield Crush. converting all of it to cold with Hrimsorrow, +1 frenzies, very cheap item, no one gives a shit about this sort of thing. And then getting a lot of extra Ellie as a Grace of the Goddess wand. So like I said, you buy one of these, they're cheap as fuck, but then you got to divine them to get to like, let's say 35. If you're going for like 40 and 45 to each over the top, it's going to be pretty damn expensive. Realistically, I think just like 35s plus shouldn't cost too much. And ideally, you can shop for two good stats, like two 40s plus, and then one that's like 20, and then that won't cost much at all. So you got to be a little bit crafty as to what you're searching for when you're looking these up. Because if you're just looking for triple big ones, then they're going to be priced very high. Whereas you can get pretty damn similar with just a slight concession here or there. Pretty good one for this type of shield crush and this type of build because just a really good stat stick. And then as you can see, that's kind of our damage breakdown. A lot of cold, decent bit of lightning, so we don't shock for huge values, but still reliable enough. And then a lot of fire. So those are the kind of core items. I didn't want to use a Emperor's Vigilance this time around, so I grabbed a 29 quality shield, which cost 1 divine. I put probably about 5 to 10 divines worth of dense fossils to get like 2 good prefixes. So the hybrid percent stun recovery, whatever, wasn't there. I locked those 2 prefixes and did a defense reroll, got the prefix as the hybrid, and then just finished off the suffixes with a bit of extra stats, and then synthesized it and got even more ES. So the end result is a shield worse than Emperor's Vigilance that does not have glancing blow stuff on it, so we could have more real base block. I think it'd still be fine to build around the glancing and the Emperor's Vigilance. You wouldn't have to get anywhere near as much block as I did, and then you'd have to just get like your recovery up a bit better with some life recovery on block, stuff like that. So then you can just, do a lot of evading, do a lot of taking damage through glancing and through just endurance charges and shit. And you'd still be, I think, just as thick. So I don't think you really have to go down this route with the evasion shield. Either way, I think it worked out pretty well because didn't have to deal with the Emperor's Vigilance thing. So of course we got the Ralakesh because we are using brutal charges. So I grabbed a Arm's Anguish with some stats on it. That costs like fucking 20C. No one's looking at these. And then grabbed some Ralakesh with +2 AoE. That's not really necessary at all either. I was doing that so I could try and get shield charge to hit a bit harder, but it was minute damage in the end. And then we have 10 brutal charges, 10 frenzy charges, and 10 endurance permanently. On top of that, we grabbed a Precursor's Emblem, so this is where the money sink of the build really started to settle in, with +1 max frenzy. So I think I paid 80 divines for this one. It gave me block, which was more than I currently needed, so then I decided that I would go Versatile Combatant to convert a bunch of my block to spell block, and +1 frenzy, and then also solved my accuracy in a pretty big way. But that accuracy can actually be solved with just regular rings as well, with extra big stats and stuff. And on top of that, this is what's helping us solve a bunch of that accuracy, a Sublime Vision with Precision. Because of the way that I've built the character, I pretty much have no auras except for Precision, so I get more crit, I get bigger Precision effect here, and then everything else gets disabled, which currently is nothing. So I'm not using any other auras. I have Precision over there. I have Blood and Sand. I have Herald of Purity and Herald of Ash with an Enlighten and a Tempest Shield for the extra block. And this Sublime Vision costs 2 or 3 divines. No one's really using these for good reason. They're not very particularly usable. So yeah, I also POB'd just to double check. So this seems like a crazy, gear block thing, but if you actually just use regular rings with more Omni, let's say, mirrored rings with like 100 stats, 100 to each stat, or like a tri-stat ring like people used to use when Omni first came out, you don't really lose any damage in the build whatsoever. You don't need the extra 2 frenzies, you instead get like a bunch of extra Omni, so you can definitely still build without one of these in mind, and honestly, it was kind of a waste of 80 divines, but it was still a pretty fun little purchase that I could kind of build around. So it wasn't, too bad. It wasn't the end of the world, and still made the character a bit cooler, I think. We then have just one of my only other rare items. I just grabbed a hat with some strength and then rolled Chaos Res because I wanted to fill out my Chaos Res. I didn't want to have any sort of glaring weaknesses in the build. So that's currently where it's at with the res, and it was a little bit hard to fill out the res. If I had more Omni, it would have been, with the real rings, it would have been easier to fill out the res. But that's currently what I did to do that. And then Replica Frill's Fur. Just grabbed that thing because I could get it with +2 AoE, which meant that I could get the Shield Crush up to level 21 and then 24. And it also solves generation for both of these charges. So seems like a pretty good choice, but there's other choices as well. I originally wanted to do an Utula's with a lot of extra life and stuff, but I couldn't fit that in with the brutal charges. There's a lot of nuance to a lot of what I could have done for chests. I think it's a pretty versatile, flexible kind of build, and you can build it many different ways, but this is just how I've chosen to go about it this time. So to try and hit level 24, I had to use an Awakened Added Fire with the +1. It's a pretty weak support gem except for that +1, and ultimately it wasn't super worthwhile, so if you just have a better support gem setup without the +2 AoE, I think that will work out just fine too. And, something like a melee fizz because I'm missing that one. That's a pretty big multiplier. Using early damage with attacks, inspiration, pulverize, added fire, and multi-strike. Yeah, assassin mark on hit there. We're using fortify with shield charge, life tap, and faster attacks. That's good enough to actually clear and do some pretty good damage, and also fortify for certain fights. Less duration needs to be over here just so we cycle faster on our aspect of the cat so that our charges are actually maximum. And then aside from that, I have a timeless jewel over here that just does some stats, so like 20 dex and 5% dex and dex, which is just all turned into Omni. Like I said, picked up 3 passive jewels here for Devastator. Realistically, I don't think you need to do that. I don't think it's adding much to the build. Feed the Fury is the other main thing that gives us a bunch of extra damage, attack speed while leeching and stuff, so it's pretty cool. I went over here, Feed the Fury, Devastator. Over here, I went Devastator, Fettle, and 1 with shield. So if you stack more 1 with shields, I think you become a bit thicker because life on block ends up being pretty overpowered. And then over here, I just crafted a life chaos cluster that has some extra chaos and life because we needed that. So nothing crazy, and a Devastator over here that, like I said, didn't think helped too much. So that's currently the tree, that's currently the thing. Seething Fury, of course. I spec'd all this. Realistically, maybe this didn't need to happen and more of this for damage, but I did that to fill out some accuracy and some area. And yeah, the end result was pretty damn cool, I think. So I'd say it's a character that can be built several different ways. You can steal some gladiator stuff, steal some champion stuff. You don't have to go necessarily full charge stack. You don't have to go Omni. In general, I think Shield Crush is pretty good. Just a big hybrid sort of setup like this. And then the Merc has Aspect of the Spider that we're taking advantage of with Venomous' Shroud that makes enemies deal less damage and then also have less res. You have Venomous Spinners so that they have another spider web on them. And then yeah, other than that, it's just a normal kind of Merc with Anathema, so that he's got Ellie Weakness and Temp Chain Gloves, Call of the Void for a bit of extra stuff if that's working, and then Intimidate over there and Lucky Hit over here. Pretty cool Merc with the slow that he had for the end game, so I can recommend trying one of those at some point, because yeah, he can also have Grace over here, and then that would make you kind of an absolute beast. So there it is. Probably would have been my build of league if it wasn't for the Spark build. Still kind of is better in many regards, but overall I think the Spark build's just quite a bit bigger. Either way, very strong character. With that, I'm going to be making one other build, I think. I think we have time for one more build, and that's what I'm running. So thank you very much for watching. See you guys next time.